Live from inside Porsche, Colorado Springs, it's the First Dibs podcast with our hosts, John Deisty and Justin Underwood. Buckle up and let's go for a ride.
All right, everybody.
Hey.
We're skipping the music because we got people on a timeline.
That's right.
So welcome back to the First Dibs podcast. This is the matinee edition.
Yeah.
We're at work. Yeah, and it's a very special day. We've got a couple of the Pikes Peak competitors, Loni Unser and Jeff Zwart. Super excited for this. Loni, it's her third year here, raced with us kind of to start, and now she's back in another Porsche. Jeff, I think everybody on the other end of this probably knows. Awesome guy, and coaching Loni this year, driving an air-cooled 911 up the mountain. So thank you guys very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. This is our fun thing. This is the whole reason we do this podcast, is so we can put a box in front of us so we look important, so we can talk to people like you guys.
Right.
So this is pretty fun.
Try to make it worth your while.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. Well, we appreciate that. Loni, I think you come from a long history of racers and Pikes Peak racers specifically. And Jeff, you've been, participating in the race for, quite a few years. One thing that I was interested in is just kind of your first memory of the race. Not necessarily the first time you raced it, but just maybe the first time you became aware that people were racing up a mountain in Colorado.
Yeah, so my family has raced this race. There's 26 wins amongst the whole Unser family, and that's overall too, by the way. So that's pretty incredible. So growing up, I always knew about it, and it was always something kind of my family talked about. And when I started racing, everybody would ask me, Loni, when are you going to do the Pikes Peak hill climb? And I'd always kind of brush them off. In my head, I'm like, I'm never doing that. No way, no chance. I do not want to do the Pikes Peak hill climb. And when I was racing Spec Miata, I was living in Boulder, which is just up the road from here. And we had a race at the Pikes Peak International Speedway. And we came out, my dad came out, and I said, Dad, hey, can you take me up the mountain in your streetcar? I want to see what this thing's all about. So we drove up together in my streetcar, and pretty immediately I was realizing that I definitely do not want to do this race. I asked him, I was like, Dad, how are you not absolutely terrified the entire time? And he said, Loni, you just focus on the road. And I said, I was like, there's no way. There's no way. I kind of brushed him off. And so we came back down. I didn't think about it for the next couple of years, really. And I, again, was living in Boulder about 3 years later at the time, and I had nothing going on race day. And because I love race cars and I love racing, and hey, my family has done this cool race, let me go see what it's actually about. So I bought a ticket. I came up and just kind of by myself, parked my car, walked about a mile to the start line, and that day I instantly knew I wanted to race the Pikes Peak hill climb. So it really just took going to the race for me.
The race is wild, isn't it?
It's so wild.
Yeah.
There's nothing else like it. I mean, there's a buzz in the air. It's like a car show in it of itself as well. All of the really cool things that come out here. Just getting to walk around the paddock and see it and watch the cars take off from the line, and looking at the live stream at what these competitors were doing just absolutely sparked my interest, and it surprised me. But that day I was like, okay, I know what I'm doing 365 days from now. I'm going to be racing.
That's super cool. Did you grow up in the mountains?
Yeah, I grew up in Idaho, so a small ski town in Idaho. I grew up ski racing. I grew up running around the mountains as a kid, and so I love the mountains. The mountains are like home to me, and so really I think that was another thing that got me, was that this is my two favorite things, mountains and being in the thin, beautiful mountainous air, and then also race cars. So I can't believe I hadn't really given it more credit before. I think I was just kind of scared of it, to be honest. So when it all came together and I saw it happen, it's changed my life that day.
Yeah. That's super cool. Well, welcome back. Really excited to see how it all goes this year. I think it's the new car looks awesome. Can't wait to see that run.
The new car has been really incredible. So it's super fast on the mountain. I haven't driven anything quite as fast as this. There's not much in road racing that is as fast as this car. It makes about 900 horsepower. It is capable of more, of course, at sea level. And it's just incredible that the speed it's addicting.
I can see that. We have a 900 horsepower 2014 Turbo S hybrid thing that's parked over there, and I got to drive that briefly because someone wanted to test drive it, but like I don't trust myself with that car. I definitely don't trust a stranger with it, and just you could be on the gas for 2 seconds and then you were very much in jail. So the acceleration I can see being addictive.
Oh, it's unreal.
Very cool. Jeff, how about you? First memory of learning about the race?
Yeah, I think my dad had a subscription to a number of automotive magazines growing up, and Road and Track was one of them. And Road and Track would regularly cover the hill climb. And, I think even then I was definitely a visual person, and seeing cars racing up this dirt road up the side of a mountain and the roost of the rocks coming off the wheels and the dust plumes following the cars, it was just something. And I'm sure I was looking at Loni's relatives, running up there at the same time in the pages of Road and Track. And interestingly, after I graduated from Art Center College of Design in 1979, probably in 1982, I was working for Road and Track magazine, and they sent me to Pikes Peak to cover the race.
Wow.
So here was a magazine that I had seen the race in growing up, and now I had the assignment to shoot that race. And so it was definitely on my radar. It just was racing was not on my, not in something that I was really participating in at a time. But I was definitely hooked on the race itself, and it conjured up all this kind of thought of maybe someday I could drive here or do something about it. So, so here we are.
Yeah, that's pretty fun.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love the full circle story there of, having, I think we've talked about this before, just how you had, read Road and Track and then got to work there and then ran the calendar for years and years and years. I just think that's a really fun thing. It gives kids hope, I think, right? Like the things that you love as a child, you're able to do if you really put it in and, obviously have a bunch of talent for it, but make the work and do the work for it.
Absolutely. And I find, I don't know why, but obviously I'm very involved with racing, but there are a lot of full circle moments. It's like, a few years back, or not even a few years back, maybe just a year and a half ago, but, I was asked by the Collier collection, Revs Institute, to drive the 917 PA, a Can-Am car. I got to drive that at Road Atlanta, I think. And, as I was driving it, it didn't even occur to me when it was all happening. As I was driving, I go, I think I saw this car as a kid racing at Riverside Raceway. So I went through the old photos that we had from there. And my dad had actually shot a picture over my shoulder of that car on the track. And I thought, this is like pretty unbelievable to be driving this one of special Can-Am car around Road Atlanta. And here I had actually seen it and photographed it myself when I was a little kid, barely able to see over the fence at Riverside.
Great.
This is a small world.
Yeah.
The Porsche world and the car world is a small little world. Yeah, very cool. How about talking a little bit about the first time you made it to the summit? For Pikes Peak, we talked with Fred a little bit. You're a rookie until you make it to the top. So some people are rookies for 2 or 3 or 4 years. What does it feel like when you make it all the way up? Are you, high on the lack of oxygen? Is it an exhaustion thing or is it elation?
Well, yeah, lack of oxygen is definitely one thing. For me, when I first made it to the top, my rookie year in 2022, it was really special for me because we had recently just lost some of our family members. And so to be able to do that race that year for the 100th running and be able to be at the top of the mountain was so special to me. And I just felt like my family was watching over me. So I get a little emotional about it. And I cried when I made it to the top my first race, which I don't typically do, but it just is so cool for me to be able to follow in my family's footsteps to the best of my abilities.
That's super cool. Yeah, I wonder a little bit. I was a swimmer, not at the level of competition that you guys were, but when, there was a little bit of a difference between, the way you would pace yourself and how you felt after doing one of the endurance races, something 500 yards that would take 15 minutes or, doing a mile that would take, longer. I wonder, how does Pikes Peak hill climb feel in regards to that? Is it more of a sprint or more of a marathon or a little bit of both?
It's a little, I think that, Loni talked about the emotion, connected to her family, but I find that it's a real bond with the competitors too. And I think it's, we describe it sometimes as face your fears, live your dreams kind of moment. And I think that it requires driving and doing something so far out of your comfort zone. And it's also risky. And I mean, you're constantly reminded of the risk that it takes to race here. And I think that while your adrenaline takes over and your desire to compete with others takes over, it's draining a lot out of you emotionally and physically. And like Loni says, the thin air, all the things that kind of combine that when you're at the summit, it's really not about winning or losing. It's the feeling of getting there and being there and the emotional side of competing with yourself, your own perceived limitations or own struggles that you had to turn into a corner with nothing but sky and those kinds of things. And I think that it's, even for me, 20 years later, there's a special feeling up there. And yes, you want to do as well as possible, but just to get there has always been something special. And you're really right. I think the ratio of people getting to the summit is probably greater than when I first started. That there were a lot of mechanical things and people, making mistakes along through race week that didn't allow them to race, but that they did stay rookies for multiple years. But it's daunting. I think that we all can imagine a mountain and we can imagine a road, but the 14,115 feet, the demands both physically and on the car is just unlike anywhere else. And it can't be replicated. You couldn't take the course and lay it on flat ground and have it be the same complicated, stressful ingredients that it takes to do this mountain. It's really something, and it becomes something that is so satisfying to get there. And it's something that, for me, it brings me back year after year that just want to compete and share in that feeling of it. And like I said, it's so many competitors I've seen at the top. It's not about winning or losing. It's about conquering your own fears.
Yeah. So Loni, I think you had mentioned you went up as a spectator the first time and then knew you were going to do it a year later. What does preparation look like? Is that really a full year of, learning and working on a program, or, is that something that, I see our mechanics and our technicians kind of working on these cars, and it is kind of a full year commitment, and obviously it accelerates towards the end. But what was your prep like, I guess, the first time?
It is kind of crazy you put it into that perspective, because it does take a year. It is so hard in terms of everything. You have to come up with your program. You have to get everything planned out, and the car has to be just right. And you have sponsorship and partners that, you want to make the most out of it for. And then you have to learn 156 corners on top of that. So it's incredibly a lot of preparation. And I started pretty much immediately, and coming into it, I knew that I didn't ever want to make a mistake based off of not knowing the mountain. So I would come up here in my street car. I was living, again, in Boulder at the time, and I would come up to the mountain just kind of like Fred Veach, and I would drive it just again and again and again and again. And I think that gives a really good perspective that things like video and simulator can't give. I think video and simulator, they're very valuable as well, but just driving it and being on the mountain is so valuable because you see the nuances of it. You get to see marks like trees and rocks, and what are you going to use for your apex marks, for your brake marks, things like that. Being there and really knowing it helps give you that. So I drove it as much as I could, and putting the whole deal together was really challenging because there were things that I didn't know we even needed. Like I'd come from road racing, so the thought of bringing a bunch of lights to the pits didn't occur to me. And that kind of thing is important up here. You have to think about all of these different aspects, and it's so different than road racing in so many ways because there's so many more variables. And Jeff taught me from the very beginning that the mountain is a living organism, and it changes from day to day, from minute to minute, from hour to hour. And you always have to be on your toes and ready for anything it throws at you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And actually, my mom, my family has grown to love this race. My parents, my dad came with me the first year, and then my son Lewis and my whole family have been coming ever since. And my mom just sent me a message. Has there been any weather predictions for Sunday? And I told her, yes, it could be anywhere from 20 to 90 and snowing or, beautiful sun. And it's funny. I think, you get used to kind of, weather predictions that can be kind of close. And on that mountain, it's just, we'll see. And I think that's what you got to pick.
You're kind of in God's hands there up there, so it's definitely true.
Yeah, growing up in the mountains, I certainly learned how to respect the mountains, and big 14,000-foot peaks like this create their own weather, and it can come in a matter of 20 minutes. So you really just have to be ready for anything. That first year I ran, it was pretty rainy on the bottom. It cleared up a little bit in the middle, and then it was pure fog on the top. So you can get all seasons in one run, and you have to be prepared for that, and you have to come up with a tire strategy. You have to come up with a run plan. And that's also what makes this race so cool, is that it's a thinking person's game. That's what my dad first told me when I started running this race. He's like, you have to think about this as much as you possibly can, every single variable, because the mountain will throw anything at you. And there's animals up here. There's marmots. I almost ran into bighorn sheep last year. So you have to be on your toes.
Yeah, no, I see it. I mean, just being a spectator, we've been up for practice a couple times, and the amount of wildlife you see just as that single variable is pretty crazy. And those marmots, those things are tanks.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's like hitting a bag of lead.
That's quite a piece. I guess we've kind of talked a little bit about why this race in particular. So we can glance through that one.
Well, the two of you have worked together before this year.
Yeah.
And I mean, specifically here for Pikes Peak Hill Climb, you were coaching the GT4 class, and you raced in that. And that was kind of a fun, interesting year.
Yeah.
And so, Loni, is there a difference this year working a little bit more one-on-one versus with the team or the group, comparison with the GT4 series?
Well, I'm just so grateful for Jeff because he has taught me so much about this place, and I would not be where I am without him. Mm-hmm. So he knows every rock, every tree,
Unfortunately.
Yeah, he knows every little thing about this mountain, and so his expertise is absolutely invaluable to me. And it's just been so amazing. And because I got to work with him for the first year that I ran, it's really cool to come into this year because we can just build off of that knowledge and start to kind of think about it in even a different way and a different perspective, going from a 400 and something horsepower car to a 900 horsepower car. Right. The mountain changes in a lot of ways depending on the car you're driving.
Hey, definitely. It's fun for me because I kind of was always coaching the GT4 class, which was equal horsepower and performance in all the cars, and the drivers came from different positions, but Pikes Peak kind of neutralizes everybody in a way that, it kind of gives them almost a reset, because it isn't road racing, it isn't rallying, it isn't, Baja. It's somewhere in between all that. And so certain people's disciplines rise up to accept it, or people that you think have lots of experience and would not be intimidated at all, but find it to be quite an intimidating place. And to kind of come back and coach somebody in a different car, in a different world, several years later, like I am with Loni now, you have to adjust your own coaching. And, we go from, I always kind of hand it off, even in the 2 weeks or 3 weeks that we coach, is that the first coaching is all about the gotchas. I'm here to coach you. how not to get in trouble. Then it evolves into, I'm here to coach you on how to race. And then the last part is, I'm here to coach you on how to win. But you can't do one before the other. And it's a very process-driven method, at least that I coach to. So for Loni, it's also changing cars and things, in that she's gone from a car that lost a lot of momentum the moment you overbraked or overslowed the car, and just sheer climbing the mountain, it got to have less power as it went up, things like that. But, a big horsepower car, which fortunately I've experienced also, is a different style of driving and different approach to it. And Loni's been so good at the process. The process is so important to me, but not everybody kind of pays attention to it. And like I've said, and I see it in herself, our process doesn't change year to year. It's a necessary process to stay out of trouble, but ultimately to also go faster. And so it's fun for me because I always say I'm kind of pulling back the curtain to my process. This year, I feel like I'm pulling back the curtain to how I go fast,
Right.
And it's been, let's say, a little more entertaining
Sure.
in coaching than
Right.
it was before, because you kind of have to give it on an even field.
That's pretty fantastic. So, I mean, for both of you, do you ever get any kind of sense of concern from your families for doing this race? I know. So David is driving for David Donahue is driving our car this year, and I know that his family has concern for him because of what things that can happen.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel that as you're practicing anything?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, of course. I think just in general, anytime I go out on the racetrack, my family is wanting me to do well and stay safe, and it's especially important here. And they want the best for me, and they don't want anything to happen. So it is a hard race for them. I think about if I was watching them race, I would have a difficult time.
Sure.
Because somebody brought up a good point to me the other day, is that especially when you're testing, the only way that you know that your loved one is safe and did well is that they just keep sending cars.
Right.
And so there's no real kind of way to gauge that. So it's definitely a difficult one in that sense. But, that on the other hand, that's what makes it special, is that you get to share this kind of intense moment with each other. And it brings you closer at the end of the day.
Yeah, the risk is undeniable.
Yeah.
So, you take somebody like my wife who's been here over 20 times. It doesn't get any easier.
Right.
And I think that, I love that we kind of share in our adventures in a way, but, it's also, you kind of are expecting a lot to be up here. And I remember the first years, I used to say, you got to come. It's going to be great. You're going to stay in. I'm going to put you up in Devil's Playground, and you can overlook the whole race. And, she's up there hunkered down in 60-mile-an-hour winds and hail and everything else.
Right.
And the fact that she ever came back after that, but, it's not the most comfortable. It's not like a race where you sit in the grandstands and wait. And interestingly, even the cell service and the communication is kind of slow in certain parts. And, it's kind of like either you really kind of work in darkness of, not knowing what I'm up to or where I am, or you're here on site. But, she does come to the races. And it's also, Pikes Peak is very much family. We bond over our shared interest in the event, the shared interest in competition, and it brings the people and the ancillary people beyond the competitors together year after year. So she has friends that she only sees here, and seeing that. So but it's not making it any easier. And I'm also just grateful that she still comes and hangs out.
Right. Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And from last year, so unfortunately, last year is the only time that I've ever actually made race day. There's so much activity happening here. By the time that race day happens, whether something else in life is caught up or whatever, but it was really fun. So we've talked about it before on the show with Jason and some of the crew members that, yes, it's competitive up until, even on race day, it's very competitive. However, yes, down at the pits in the paddock area, it's a lot of camaraderie. Everything's one big family is the feel of it. And I caught myself when cars would go up, the thing I would look for is a time,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It didn't even matter what the time is. It's just, hey, there's a time. That means they made it right to the top.
Yeah.
And then after that, okay, then look and see what the time is, and then maybe celebrate.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really cool thing because it just felt like that's what everybody was concerned about, was just finish.
It's the definitive nature of the getting there. And, the race itself there's no do-overs. There's no second chances. There's no pit stops to adjust something or make up from something. And I like that kind of absolute moment that you're trying to achieve of going from the bottom to the top as quick as you can. It's just, I've done, a good bit of road racing, and there's nothing quite like this experience because you literally work, for 2 weeks of time on the mountain, with kind of like these blinders wide open, taking as much information as you can get off the mountain. And then when race day comes, you go down to this narrow, focusing on absolutely the only things you need to pay attention to. So it's full commitment. And like I said, there's no second guesses or second chances. It's just definitive. You've got to get to the top as fast as you can. And sadly, if things don't go the way you want them to, you got another year to think about it. So it's not like you can make it up a week later at another hill climb somewhere. So it's stressful, but a good kind of stress, at least for me. So
Yeah,
it's good.
that's awesome. Lonnie, you've done the race 3 times. Jeff, how many times have you done the race?
20, I guess. 21. I was in the head when I had it was 21, but I'll take 20.
Okay.
So how's that?
Okay. And Lonnie, do you envision yourself being that 20 plus race veteran?
Yeah, absolutely. There's just something about this place that is so addicting, and it makes you want to come back year after year. But it's also funny because, and I've talked to other competitors about this, is that sometimes when you're up there, you're like, why am I doing this? This is crazy. And then you do a run and you're like, that's why I'm doing this.
Right.
This is so cool. And then you get to talk to your other competitors, which is really neat because, like, kind of like you guys touched on, it's one of my favorite parts about this race is that the camaraderie between all of the drivers and all of the crew and everybody up there making this happen is so unique and so good. And I think that's because at the end of the day, everybody just wants each other to be safe and have this really enjoyable moment of driving a really cool car on a really cool mountain.
For sure. Yes. And the car you're driving's been around for a little bit. The car you're driving has done the hill climb before successful. Did really well.
Very successful.
So that's awesome. Yeah, that's good. And then Jeff, on the other side of that, the car that you're driving was kind of completed here within the last week or so.
Last few minutes.
Last few minutes. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
No, I'm very fortunate. Mobile One has a program with BBI, which BBI, just for reference, built my last winning car here in 2015. And it was also kind of the same idea that it was a little bit of everything at that time in the car. In 2015, it was a turbocharged Cup car with, about 800, 900 horsepower, much like Lonnie's car, but Lonnie's in a newer chassis, newer everything on it. But it's an interesting car also relative to my own history here. I started competing here with Porsche in 1994, and that was a 964 based car. In 1995, along came a 993 twin turbo all-wheel drive car. So finally, there was a package that was really perfect for Pikes Peak being dirt. And that ran from 95 all the way to 2000 basically for me. And I had literally the most success in a 993 chassis. I think I had 4 or 5 wins in a row in that particular chassis. So then 997 came along, 991, all these other variants, water-cooled, obviously. Longer wheelbases, just a different car completely. Well, this car that Mobile One and BBI have, gotten together to build is based on a 993. So the car that I'm driving is kind of technically a 1997 car with an air-cooled motor, twin turbo. But the cool part is underneath all that is basically 991, 992 state-of-the-art GT3 Cup running gear, suspension, everything in it. So it's, sequential shifting and traction control and ABS and all the things that I didn't have back in the day. And so it's a combination of the kind of historical significance of the last great air-cooled race car, 993, with the latest, greatest water-cooled race car things underneath it. So it's on paper, it's a really fun combination, and also was able to be built with carbon fiber bodywork. So it's very light. I mean, it's literally 700 pounds lighter than what I drove last year. Wow. Which I'm, quite excited to get in something that feels like that. Yeah. So very good.
You know what we need? We need oil money. Think about the fun we could have with a little bit of oil money there. Man.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. Gosh, that's
Mobile One's been on my program since 1997. So.
Wow. I think that's a testament to them and you. For sure. The fact that, you can have such a long-term partnership with somebody and it's not, they're not looking for other spots and you don't need it's just a really cool partnership there. I love seeing the Pegasus fly in and stuff like that. It's super fun.
And, it's also, what better place to showcase motor oil than Pikes Peak?
Right.
I mean, the dynamic of racing up the side of the mountain in thin air and wacky temperatures and all the loads on the car and everything. So it's also a great showcase. And as I mentioned earlier, there's not many places that are more visual than this place too. So to promote something.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And we're super lucky here at Porsche Colorado Springs that Mobile One has decided to team up with us. Probably, I'm sure it has something to do with you as well in there. So thank you for being an ambassador of our store and for what you do.
Always,
here. But that's a great partnership. I'm loving it. And tomorrow, for our drivers meet, they'll have a pretty good presence along with Yokohama and some other people. But yeah, I think it's super cool, and it's just going to grow. It's just going to continue to get better.
For sure.
Yeah. So I'm thinking back, and why do you think Porsche is such? I mean, Porsche is an iconic racing brand in general, but it seems like the Porsche's been very successful on Pikes Peak. I think all the way back to David Donner's dad had run an RSK here back in the 50s or 60s, something like that. Is there something about the Porsches that makes them stand out for this hill climb stuff? Or
certainly, just the configuration of a 911 is very important to its success. The engine being over the drive wheels, the lightweight nature of the car, making it very nimble and very agile. You got to remember, most hill climbs in the beginning in Europe were all dirt, as Pikes Peak was. So it has a natural kind of ability at that. And, Vic Elford demonstrated that by just kind of borrowing a car and winning a rally an early 911 and winning right away. And as you say, one of the great local racers here and a whole family is the Donners and David here, who's had great success in Porsches and open wheel cars and all sorts of things. His father running there. And I think it is a natural platform to do well at it. And historically, it's got a great hill climb record. In Europe, the European Hill Climb Championship was a major championship. Thousands of people would show up at the races in southern Germany and in Austria and all around, and they were dominated by cars like Porsche. I think that the hill climb champion, at least in the 60s, for maybe 8 of the 10 years were driving Porsches. So
wow,
pretty cool.
Yeah. And Loni, are you driving off season? Well, to us, Pikes Peak is the season, right?
Of course.
Are you driving kind of year round? What's your typical annual driving routine look like right now?
I am. I have a really busy schedule, which I'm so grateful for. I am racing in the Porsche Sprint Challenge, which happens all over the country, and I'm driving in a Cayman RS, which has been an absolute blast. And it's really cool because we get to run Mobile One in the car, and we get to run on Yokohama tires. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of perfect to then be able to come up here on the mountain and drive a Porsche on Yokohama's running Mobile One. So it's really cool because it's kind of a full program, and that season has been going really well so far. And then I'm also doing some off-road racing, which also kind of translates well to Pikes Peak in a way, because it has that kind of crazy, unpredictable nature to it as well. And I'm very new to that whole world, but that whole world is very, very cool. And I love looking back to the dirt days of the Pikes Peak hill climb. I mean, that's when my family dominated, and the photos and just all of it, the feeling of the Pikes Peak hill climb when it was dirt was super unique, and it's unique now, but in a different way. So it's kind of cool to bring it all kind of full circle together and run the GT3 Turbo Cup up here with BBI this year.
Man, that's an impressive resume. I mean,
Yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah, right. Yeah. And what, you graduated high school a few years ago? Like, it's like, I mean, holy cow. I mean, it sounds like you've got a pretty good lifetime of experience, already, and you're excelling, you're doing really well. So.
Yeah, trying my best every day is a new day to learn something and grow and improve, and I'm just lucky I get to do it in really cool cars with really incredible people. I think that's what makes everything so special, is to be able to work with really, really awesome people like the BBI guys, and it's just we're out here doing cool stuff.
Right, yeah.
And I think also the kind of what you need is skill sets at Pikes Peak, because as Loni said early on, the mountain changes, the surface changes. You need to read it all the time. And in off-road racing or rallying, you're constantly reading, adjusting, making adjustments where, when road racing, turn 9 comes around in every minute and 32 seconds, and it's probably just like the last time you drove through it. But Pikes Peak is 156 new opportunities to mess with you, with 156 turns. So reading it, adapting to it, having the skill set of car control because of the surface could go loose at any moment. All of those things add up to, you're kind of sharpening yourself in much in the same way the difference between mountain biking and road biking. They're both a form of exercise, but the skill sets that you need for them are different. And that's where off-road rally, things that she's dabbling in right now, are definitely going to contribute to her success here at Pikes Peak.
For sure. That's awesome. I like that, because we get to touch on with some of the other drivers, like you can't brake when your tires are in the air.
Yeah.
And you don't think of that, right? In road racing, like you put it in a great way. Most likely, turn 9 is going to be just like it was the last time you came around. Where here, like Fred, points out that minute by minute, the road can change. So there's not really a racing line, right? I guess is what he says. It's just, you just have to kind of know and read the road. I'm assuming that's pretty difficult to adapt to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could have one run that's good, and then there could be rocks in the road the next run, or animals in the road. So you're always thinking, or goats could come overnight and eat the hay bales that you were using as references.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Or marmots. I had a line of marmots in one of the corners my first year, and I swear they were watching me and like taunting me because they were right on the edge of the road. And I remember Jeff recently saying, "Don't hit one of those. It's like a bag of lead." So, it's ever changing, and it goes to, you've got to look so much further ahead. You got to just be analyzing every single little piece of the road.
Yeah, for sure. And John touched on it in the weather forecast, right? You just never know what's going to be happening. And whether it was it 2 years ago when the crazy fog, that was super scary, and David driving, he had a kind of a moment where he was looking for the mark, right? And it happened to be a piece of pavement. It was a new piece of pavement, and he was counting them off and went to wide open throttle to full brake, and then realized he was one early, right? And thought, oh my gosh, how's this happening? But yeah, it's something that it changes so quickly and so rapidly, and it changes everything. It changes everything so fast.
And certainly that year, in all the years I've run, I've never driven in such difficult conditions. I mean, and then, I'm saying that with all the years I've run, and you take somebody like Loni or anybody that has, not a lot of experience on the mountain and combine it with literally zero visibility. It's definitely a memorable year for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure.
As a spectator, that was one of my favorites. It was so miserable. We had so much fun, just huddled up down below in the drizzly rain and everything like that. And
Type 2 fun.
Oh yeah. And then some of my friends were up at Glen Cove, and they were like, "It was a beautiful sunny day. What are you talking about?" And we were all down just shivering.
Yeah, it went in and out.
The
whole way up. So and you wouldn't know which way it was going to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I take it both of you are going to be here tomorrow.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. So for our annual drivers meet, and you're going to MC.
I think I am
some of the
again for
questions?
this year.
Okay,
I think
awesome.
I've done this since the beginning of this little project Joe throws at
That's
me every
right.
year.
Yeah.
But it is fun. I mean, the drivers that we have this year lined up is probably one of the best lineups I've seen. And
cool.
I look forward to having those drivers share their experiences, not just at Pikes Peak, but motorsport and the brand Porsche. And we get to touch on a lot of things. And it's always so well attended. I'm always really impressed that this little dealership that I used to come to when it had just opened is now hosting a great event like this during an already busy race week.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's pretty
for sure.
cool.
And Lana, you'll be here.
Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
Okay. You're going to be receiving some questions from Jeff, I'm assuming. Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's going to
That's
throw some
fantastic.
tough ones at me.
Yeah. Right.
What
yeah.
corner?
Right. Yeah. For sure. No, for
Ooh,
sure.
that'd be a good one. We should get
Yeah.
flashcards.
Right?
You got
Yeah.
to name them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I get a big kick because we get a lot of kids. And adults,
Yeah.
right? Adults get Richard. You guys know Richard, our guy. He volunteers for this,
Yeah.
which is amazing,
And drives out.
and drives out, from Arkansas
Yeah.
to do all this stuff. And he, if you remember from last year and years before, he makes a poster that has all of his drivers, right, that he really follows, and he follows rallying, quite closely. And it's a genius idea. And then he finds all of you, during this event to have you sign it. So he's got this super incredible. And I think it's so cool that you guys take the time to do that, right? Because you're right there. I mean, everyone's there. You're able to see it up close and personal, and they're able to talk to you, if you have time. So thank you so much, for being open like that. And the kids that come in, and John will hand out 1,000 Hot Wheels, for kids to get signed, if he's got them. But it's such a cool event, and because you keep coming back, it just keeps getting better and better.
Yeah, it's a highlight of the week for sure.
Yeah, this race wouldn't be what it is without everybody who supports, first of all, and then the fans as well. I mean, I've heard stories of families coming up here for generations to watch this race, and it makes it so much more special because they get to share their experiences that they've had kind of on the other side of things, watching the cars go by, and we get to share our experiences with them. So it makes it really cool, and we get to share this passion that we have for Pikes Peak, and it brings everybody together, and it almost feels like a family even between the fans.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's weird to me because, like, if you really think about what your experience is as a spectator,
Yeah.
Right.
like that's about it. And then there's
Yeah.
another cool one, and it shouldn't be as great as it is.
Yeah.
And there's something in the mix. Maybe it is just the lack of oxygen, but the fact that there are the spectators and the people that are there, I feel like almost push the race forward too, because you become so invested in it, right? And you just love the fact that it's here.
Yeah. Well, and in a different way, as I mentioned, it's kind of every run's an adventure in a way. It's not just, an experience. It's a true adventure. I think that just coming here as a spectator, it's a bit of adventure too. So it's not your traditional go to the stadium and sit down and watch for 2 hours. This is a big commitment, and it pays off by, you're in one of, I've traveled the world, you're in one of the most beautiful places on earth, and there just happens to be a race going on at the same time. So
Yeah.
pretty spectacular.
Yeah, I like to joke that I'm this isn't a joke. I'm horrible at camping. I can't pack well enough. I need to shower every night. I'm not good at being dirty, but Pikes Peak is my way to camp. I get to spend a day on one of the coolest mountains and bring up a bunch of stuff and, have a good time. So,
Right.
Great.
I don't know. That's pretty fun.
A bunch of stuff includes stadium style folding chairs,
Yeah.
and cocktails.
Right.
Pairs well with the thin air, right?
It does. Well, I was a bartender. I got to keep my crew satisfied.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I don't know. I don't know. I feel like we've had a really good conversation. I would
Absolutely.
keep these guys here longer, but I know they got busy schedules.
My mind goes blank because I'm not going to lie. I'm sitting here in front of living legacies and legends, right?
Yeah.
So normally we're sitting here in front of friends, which I consider you guys friends. You don't have to call me a friend, but I'll call you guys a friend. It's just I don't get odd very often, but having both of you sitting here with us, taking this time to schedule this with us, I thank you.
Flying back
Thank
from Poland, coming in from all over the place. I mean, that's just cool.
Yeah.
I guess one thing, the King of the Mountain documentary, I just got to go to the premiere of that on Sunday. Really fun movie about the Pikes Peak Hill Climb Race. And it's called King of the Mountain, but I think there needs to be an asterisk because there has been a queen. And I'm excited to be sitting with, hopefully another future queen of the mountain. But one of the questions that I really enjoyed from that documentary is, do you have to be crazy to race Pikes Peak? And maybe we can just close with a couple comments on that. Do you think you're crazy to do it, or do you think just some of your other competitors are?
Well, I don't know. I don't feel too crazy, but no, I think for me, what my dad said to me when I first experienced this mountain is you just focus on the road and it becomes any other road. You just have to approach it a little bit differently is so true. I mean, when you're up there, for me, it turns into any other racetrack. I'm just as focused or more focused on exactly my marks that I have to hit. I don't think about anything else. So for me, I don't think I'm crazy, but some may. I'm curious to see what Jeff has to say.
I think crazy is a state of mind. No, and I think that, you need to have the proper mindset to come here, really. And, the outside world might think it's crazy, but I think internally most everybody that's here, and like Lonnie said earlier, there are those moments like, what am I doing here? It is daunting when you start to really break it down of what you're doing. So, but I don't feel crazy about it. But the only crazy part is I'm crazy to come back another year. So
that's the truth.
That's the best part. So, yeah.
Sure.
Well, cool. On that, we'll see you guys next year.
Yes.
Okay.
And tomorrow. And looking forward to Pikes Peak this Sunday.
Yeah, incredibly fun days coming ahead.
No, great. So thank you
so much for having us.
Thank you.
Our pleasure, and you don't even know how much. So thank you guys. For First Dibs, I'm John. That's Justin. That's Jeff and Lonnie. Thank you guys. And let's get back to Tuesday, huh?
All right.
All right.